For the whole podcast in English, please fast forward. Vou falar com vocês hoje sobre a seleção genética de rebanho em manadas, né? Uma abordagem do Bjorn, um selecionador de genética, um criador, né? De desenvolvedor de animais. Ele é sueco e ele vem trabalhando com uma abordagem que é essa abordagem de seleção genética e um cruzamento por manada. Ao invés de selecionar um macho em específico, ele coloca vários machos por estação e vai selecionando a partir daí. Tem alguns pontos que eu quero marcar aqui para vocês nesse resumo inicial, para depois vocês poderem assistir o vídeo como um todo. A indústria do melhoramento genético, melhoramento entre aspas, exige que a gente tenha mais horas de cuidado, mais insumo, mais suplemento, mais remédios, para que os animais possam ter uma boa performance. Então, ela tem um crivo de performance por cabeça. O Bjorn chama isso, né, de síndrome do Grande Carneiro, ou pode ser síndrome do Grande Touro, enfim, né? Aquela coisa de que existe um animal que você vai investir muito nele para que ele melhore a genética do seu rebanho como um todo. Isso tem um sentido quando a gente faz uma seleção genética baseado no que preconiza a indústria. Mas a indústria fez dessa maneira e beneficia muito a indústria de insumos, de remédios, etc. Né? Então existe uma discrepância. Nós compramos animais, os machos reprodutores, de cabanhas, de lugares que tratam esses animais a pão de ló, e eles têm que performar, têm que render para a gente numa realidade a pasto ou numa realidade com muito menos insumo. Então, o desenvolvimento genético de rebanho, com essa uma cruza por manada, tem diferenças significativas. Ela ajuda muito o pequeno e médio produtor no sentido de que aumenta muito a lucratividade, levando em conta a saúde total do rebanho por área. Então é lucratividade por área e não performance por animal, por cabeça. O Bjorn vem trabalhando há muito tempo com desenvolvimento genético, já ajudou várias pessoas, consulta com isso, e ele desenvolveu uma raça de ovinos na Suécia que o pessoal tem chamado de ovelha da paz, né? É ovelha da paz porque é uma paz criar essa ovelha. Ela não tem problema com verminose, ela não tem problema de casco, ela não tem problema para parir, elas entram no cio e conseguem emprenhar ainda antes dos 12 meses de idade. E ele fez esse desenvolvimento dessa raça de ovinos baseado em duas necessidades. É uma raça que vem da área nórdica lá, né? A Gotland Sheep, a ovelha Gotland, que é de uma ilha, enfim, de uma história lá dos países nórdicos, com um cruzamento com uma Beltex. Beltex é um tipo de Texel que é usado na Europa. Qual foi a lógica do cruzamento dele? Ele queria o pelego da ovelha Gotland, que é muito valorizado lá, e ele queria a precocidade e a conversão de peso dos Texel. E ele vem fazendo isso já há algum tempo, já tem vários anos que ele vem desenvolvendo essa raça, e tem dado muito certo. Nessa conversa com ele, a gente vê de novo diferenças muito grandes entre o que a indústria chama de melhoramento genético e o que ele trabalha com melhoramento genético. A primeira diferença é que, ao invés de olhar para um animal, ele olha para a saúde e performance do rebanho como um organismo só. É uma diferença muito significativa, porque você aumenta a média de performance e de saúde do rebanho como um todo, ao invés de ficar olhando para um indivíduo, que você coloca mais dinheiro nele, mais atenção nele e fica preso com aquilo ali. Então, eu vou fazer um resumo, quem quiser depois dar uma olhada aqui, assiste o podcast como um todo aqui e bota uma legenda para assistir. De novo, selecionam-se, primeiro faz o descarte de todas as fêmeas que têm problema. Aprumo, problema de casco, problema de verminose, baixa conversão de peso, um descarte. Normalmente um descarte entre 15% e 30% do rebanho todo ano, para quem pode bancar esse descarte, né? A partir desse primeiro ano e desses descartes, você tem a opção de trazer um carneiro bom ou de selecionar um carneiro a partir dessas ovelhas que você já tinha. Você vai selecionar a partir das fêmeas que emprenharam primeiro, naquela primeira janela ali da estação de monta. Você pode fazer uma estação de monta curta ou um pouco mais longa, mas você vai escolher os machos que nascem primeiro, ou seja, das ovelhas mais adaptadas. De novo, estou falando em ovelha, mas pode ser qualquer tipo de animal, tá? que primeiro emprenharam, então entraram no cio primeiro e tiveram uma gravidez tranquila, e conseguiram amamentar e conseguiram nutrir os seus filhotes e não teve problema nenhum. A partir dos machos que nascem dessas melhores fêmeas, ele escolhe uma seleção de machos. E ao invés de ficar preso com o melhor macho, ele pega alguns melhores machos e coloca eles para competir numa estação de monta sem separar. Ele não está interessado em o melhor macho, ele está interessado no melhor produto genético médio daquele rebanho. Então, no segundo ano, ele tem já o descarte das fêmeas que não eram boas, uma seleção dos machos, e aí depois da estação de monta, esses machos ou vão para o abate, ou vão para uma venda para outros criadores que estão interessados naquele tipo de macho, na seleção genética que você vem fazendo como criador. E ele vai repetindo isso. No terceiro ano, aí ele já começa a conseguir escolher entre as melhores fêmeas e os melhores machos, e ele tira um percentual ali de poucos machos, de 3 a 10 machos, e coloca para fazer estação de monta. De um lado você tem, muito específico, o descarte do que você não quer, e do outro lado você tem ativamente a seleção para o que você quer. Ele usa o endocruzamento, o cruzamento entre parentes próximos, mas ele se dilui a cada geração muito rapidamente. Nessa geração você teve, por exemplo, algum macho que cruzou com uma meia-irmã e tal, e tem esse, entre aspas, problema. Mas na próxima estação de monta já não é o mesmo macho. Então esse endocruzamento vai sendo diluído. E tem vantagens nesse endocruzamento feito dessa maneira. Mais rapidamente a gente consegue ressaltar os genes recessivos que vão trazer algum problema e a gente consegue rapidamente descartar essa linhagem de animais. E mais rapidamente a gente consegue apurar as características que a gente quer. Com o auxílio dele, eu estou fazendo uma estação de monta em um grupo de ovelhas com um carneiro Texel puro e um carneiro crioulo puro. E eles estão montando em fêmeas Texel e crioula. Num outro grupo eu tenho só fêmeas Texel PO e eu estou fazendo uma monta com um carneiro crioulo PO. Então, a partir desse ano, tem uma seleção, eu descarto esses machos e passo a selecionar a partir deles. Então, o que vocês vão ver aqui hoje nesse podcast é um pouco do meu aprendizado com o Bjorn, do que a gente pode aplicar para o pequeno e para o médio produtor, para que a gente tenha uma independência das indústrias que tornam a nossa vida na pecuária mais difícil de ser viável. De novo, ele tem um trabalho muito bacana, aconselho muito a dar uma procurada na internet, tem alguns podcasts em inglês, vídeos com ele. Um que foi feito com o cara da Ridgedale Farm na Suécia também, que é o Richard Perkins, é um podcast muito bom. Tem um podcast feito também com uma produtora rural da Austrália, da ovinocultura. Enfim, não é um conteúdo que a gente acha muito fácil, mas é uma boa fonte para a gente que quer ter lucratividade em pequenas áreas e cada vez mais autonomia da indústria. Tá? Deixo com vocês esse podcast então em inglês. Bom proveito e para mais dúvidas eu respondo aqui nos comentários para vocês. Abraço.
Bjorn, thank you very much for your time. We were chatting here before start recording, and I always sort of regret a bit not recording everything because sometimes there are interesting comments and views and perspectives. Thank you for your time. Let's talk about cows and sheep, shall we?
Hello, I'm Bjorn.
Okay, so I feel we should give a little bit of a background. I've been following your work for about a year and a half now. You work with something that I find very interesting and very empowering for small farmers. You call holistic management mob breeding. Is that correct? Is that how you call it? Yes. You're very generous with your time over a Facebook group with the same name. You also interact a bit in a group that I am, that we have a few Brazilian friends talking about ultra high density grazing. And your comments, your participation, your general reading of the situations always strike to me as very down to earth. Like, how can we protect? How can we advance the farmer? The person doing the work. So that's what struck me about your participation, your comments, and that sort of stuff. And it triggered me to go after you and try to learn more from you. So thank you very much. How did you end up becoming a small farmer, Bjorn? Because you're a farmer, you're a breeder, you're a forester, you're also a gardener. How did you ended up combining all these things and enjoying them?
Yeah. So basically, I grew up on a farm. Economic situation did not allow me to continue farming. So since then, I've been everywhere. I cut trees for money. I milk cows for money. Currently, I'm pruning trees for money in the capital of my neighboring country. So basically, whatever I did after I was a farmer, it's easy. So just know that if you're a farmer and you struggle, well, it's the most difficult job there is.
And
everywhere else, I use my farming skills, and everything else is easy.
And it strengthens our ability to become competent generalists. We talked the other day, and you sent me that quote from that. What was the name of the guy? He writes fiction. I forgot his name.
The Henline. He says that you should be able to row a boat and plan a siege and so on, and like comfort the dying and deliver the babies and whatever, right? And that specialization is for insects.
No, that final line it's very good. Specializations for insects. Yeah, very good.
So the funny thing is that a farmer can do all of those things, right, with his left hand. Like, he's not afraid of blood and dirt. So a farmer is a problem solver.
Yeah, very much indeed. Would you say that you're concerned with profitability, but coming from an ecological standpoint? Like I gather from your work that you care very much about the health of the land. You care very much about the state of the property. Would it be a fair assessment to say that you're concerned with profitability, with breeding animals in a way that brings less work to the farmer, comes from your background in a small farm and having to strive and this sort of stuff?
Absolutely. I want difficult land to be easier than next year. And I want it to be even easier the year after. And I want difficult livestock to be easier. I mean, you spend unproportional amounts of time just to take doctoring sick sheep, right? While all around us, there are these lambs that come out wet and bounce up and look for milk, and they find the milk while you are dealing with that sorry lamb that needs 4 hours of care, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, breed from the strong sheep and you will have an easier time. And I want I want to take care of the land in a way that it grows more grass and becomes easier to manage, can handle more drought and more flooding and whatever. And we know the principles, we just need to apply them.
Yeah, I just want to run some context again, because Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Norway, Scandinavia in general, the same as in New Zealand and Australia, usually the owner of the farm or the farmer is involved in the daily basis operation, even if it's a bit detached, even if it's become.
That's the typical state where I come from. It's the same thing in Norway. There are people working on farms, but the farmer is always there. The farmer always gets dirt under his nails.
Yeah, so I want to contextualize, because in Brazil, we have many small farmers that are in this situation, but we have large farmers and also breeders. And I think some of the equipment doesn't make its way to Brazil for two reasons. Farm hand, or labor, it's very cheap still in Brazil. So if a breeder has money, or if a farmer is a large scale operation, he will employ people to do many things and won't care that much about the equipment or the quality of the equipment or the lifestyle of that person, because it's just the way it is in the economy. It's cheap labor everywhere. It's becoming scarce because people are not respected. But I just want to bring this issue because I see again the way you work is like to make your work easier. Like you're saying, well, choose the right lamb. Your life will be easier next year and easier the year after. Whereas we're still going towards like registered sheep breeds and cattle shows and huge bulls and huge rams. I just would like.
I mean, the mainstream way of farming and the mainstream way of breeding, it generally means more and more input, and it typically means weaker animals that need more healthcare, more individual care. But as for the what a farmer wants, he wants self-reliant sheep. So if the farmer has certain issue that takes 6 hours, he doesn't want to come back with to heaps of dead lambs. He wants to have I need to get back to tagging them because that's the only work that's there.
Yeah, and also when you have a heavily input reliant system, that also increases your labor, and that's something that people don't usually talk about. But the more inputs you use, the most external inputs you use, very likely you're going to need more internal labor to spread that input and to work and to all sorts of things like that. So you talk a lot about context. Is that a reference to holistic context from holistic management?
Yes, it was something we always talked about before I ran into holistic management some 15 years ago. So we used the Swedish word, which is sammanhang, but the thing is the same, right? When I ran into holistic management, it was very easy for me to accept it because I knew all the parts of it. So the threshold was very low. And it was like, yes, these pieces fit together. Let's do it this way, right? And when I started talking officially about mob breeding, it strikes many holistic managers how holistic mob breeding is. So you can, of course, do mob breeding without being a holistic manager, but it's just these things are so related.
It's almost like a logical conclusion when you think about context. That's why I asked you. So you had a natural inclination to deal with complexity, to deal with systems thinking, and so
yeah. So basically, the mob breeding is a system thinking approach as well, right?
Very much, yeah.
It's stemming from the fact that you observe multiple generations. Your animals, your herd is the same, but your individuals continually change, and somehow you get the same kind anyway, right? So from that, I started reading a lot about genetics, of course, and realized that in that thing called the river of life, either an individual is the ancestor of all his population or none of his population if you look far enough into the future. That means genetics come from somewhere.
Its DNA will be diluted.
It dilutes, it concentrates, and it dilutes again in a wave pattern, right? And we as managers can be part of that to weed out the difficult things, right? The sickness bringing genetics, and keep whatever keeps them strong. And we can make a natural selection, but we change the framework to something that's profitable for us. Sustainable profitability, like Sitzman calls it.
Yeah, and per area as well, not per animal. But let me just go back a little bit. Let me hold you there just for a sec. Would it be a fair comment to say that within holistic management, we have to define the whole we are managing? And what struck me in your work as very different from other people that work with breeding is that you actually talk about your animals or your mob or your flock or whatever. You call that that group of animals. You actually treat it and call it as an organism. Is it a fair comment?
So I am a killer of sheep, right? I cannot raise sheep without culling sheep and culling sheep. The only way of getting money from sheep is sort out the ones you kill. But I still love sheep, right? My relationship is to the flock, not only to the individual, because all of them will go, and most of them will go to the slaughterhouse. It's like no way of saving a sheep from death. You just keep them for a while and then they're gone. And if their ancestors are still there, you can still have a flock, and your life as a sheep farmer goes on. And if you realize that all the sheep are going to be replaced, why not replace them with something that is as good or better without paying for it?
But again, what is interesting about your approach is that you see yourself as a predator, but because you see your attachment or your work is with the flock, not with the individual, you are at the same time helping them while you are culling them.
I mean, that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
There's no one that works with animals that does not love animals. So how do we accept that we are ultimately eating all of them? Well, the contract between us and the animals is that we can eat some of them if we help the others, if we keep the young ones and continue their line. So it's basically a social contract between the flock and the farmer, or the farmer's family, because I'm just a farmer, right? I am replaceable too. So in the big pattern, there is a social contract between the domestic sheep and the sheep holding humans.
Yeah, because
we just need to honor that contract so that we minimize any suffering and maximize the joy of being a sheep while they're still alive.
Yeah, and I like what you said, because if you're doing your work properly, eventually you're going to be replaced as well. And if you're doing it properly, again, you're going to be replaced by someone that's better than you.
If I'm doing the work poorly, I'm going to be replaced faster. If I'm doing it well, I'm going to be replaced later, just like a sheep. And if I do it very right, I'm going to be replaced by someone that knows what I can knows what I know, but at a younger age, so he can grow more.
Yeah, you how do you say, you strengthen the knowledge base for the next generation, the experiences. It's not just knowledge; it's almost like an art as well. You have to develop it's a feeling. Yeah, exactly.
So we say that where I come from, we say that only a few have the eye to find the best animals, and that's true. And I know that because I have become one of them. But that's a rare skill. The thing is, anyone can find the worst animal, and we don't need to find the best one.
I want to go there. Just before we go there as well, we mentioned some of the background with holistic management and mob breeding, and your inclination to complexity, systems thinking. what do you say you bring to your mob breeding that comes from forestry, if anything? Because I've seen you talk about that before, and
yes, there is a lot actually.
Yeah.
Because when we plant, when we cut the forest down, it's not to destroy the forest.
If we're doing right again, it's to fast track succession again.
We cut all the trees down and we plant new trees. And some trees seed themselves in the same period. And some of the trees we planted die, and some of the trees we planted that died early, we can replace them early. And then we have a forest where every tree is within 4 or 5 years of age. And then we treat them like they're the same age. And simply the ones that grow the most beautiful and strong, we keep them, and we cut some of the others and thin it and give it more space. So the same thing goes with a crop of lambs. If we get them to be born within 3 or 6 weeks, well, we have a longer breeding. If we have a 34-day breeding period, most of them will be born in the first 17 days anyway. And then just a few come later, just like the extra plants we put in when, yeah. So in reality, if the lambing is concentrated, it's just like a forest plantation, which means that you can look at the animal or look at the tree and know which one it's best. You don't need to go in the records and say, okay, this one was born 4 months earlier. We don't need to care because they're born within a few weeks. So we can just sort them by eye. We don't need to weigh them or do anything. Nothing scientific about it.
And that's why I like this metaphor, because in a way, I stopped you. We were just about to talk about how one only needs to learn how to cull the worst ones, not how to spot the best ones. But I like this forest metaphor.
So when you go in the forest and you're supposed to take 30 or 40% of the trees, it's not easy in the middle, but it's very easy in the bottom, right? The worst ones, well, they already lost. You can find them immediately. You remove them, it's easier to see what's the worst next. And the same thing goes when culling sheep, right? It's once you remove the worst one, you see who is the worst one now. And I've done that so many times. I did a workshop with people that have no experience. I have cocoa farmers from West Africa do this. And there's no question that they make the right decision. I have concrete worker from Ireland. I had an architect from Spain. I had all kinds of apprentices and young farm workers, and people with no experience can always find the weakest lamb in the group. It's fascinating because we're all predators. That's our instinct to find the ones that easiest to catch.
Just before we move even further into mob breeding, do you think that people don't cull as often or the numbers that they need to because of attachment, because of paperwork, those breeding with associations, that sort of? What are the main reasons why people are not culling today? Because I grew up in a farm as well, and I remember that my grandfather wouldn't keep an animal that couldn't keep up. So I was that lucky because I come from a middle class family. But when I was a kid, my father died very young, so my grandfather raised me from my mother's side. And he was a very, very clever farmer, a very, very simple guy. And he would not keep an animal that could not pull its own weight. And now everywhere I go, people say, no.
It's really very simple. It's not fair to the animal, and it's not fair to you to keep one of those.
Yeah, if I look at his context, you would be right, because sometimes he wouldn't have a car. He would be isolated. He couldn't call a vet. He couldn't do most things that people do today. So if an animal couldn't keep up, it was just gone. And today it's like you go to the local store and you buy more meds, and you give him this and you give him that, and you keep propping it up, and And then you have to, like you said, instead of having a life that gets easier with time, you get a life that gets harder with time.
So I have some examples from Norway. I'm one of my friends is raising reindeer in the far north. So Norway is much like Chile. It's a very long country, and on the north end of Chile, north end of Norway, it goes around Sweden and it goes around Finland. So the closest way home was to drive through Finland. Wow. So basically, up there, people raise reindeer, and I have a friend there who he gets 600 new calves every year, and he's got a really high standard. I was there helping him to cull one time. He said that just for he wanted to see how I'm working, right? And there were some females of 1.5 years old, and he wanted me to point to the worst ones so he could shoot them, right, or cull them. He actually shot them inside the flock, and we butchered them on site, but which could be exotic for a lot of people. Well, it's not so much different from what we do for our household at home. But anyway, so I went to look at them, and I said, they're all good. And he smiled and he says, yes, I know. I said it like it's a challenge, right? So I point to two of them that are just good while the others are really good. And he said that I agree, and he shoots them, right? And both of them have 15 millimeters of fat on the back.
Wow.
So they were not sorry animals. I just pointed out that they are not as super as the other ones. And he said, what we have done forever is if we see a weak animal, we butcher that one. Not just to keep the flock strong, and we have this philosophy as well, he said, but the thing is, if we butcher that one, we have it. Otherwise, we will never see it again. That's how harsh his environment is, when it's often -25, -30 in the winter. Wow. So if an animal does not look good, he will never see it again. But trust me, they do. But
will be gone by next spring.
Yeah, they will be gone next week, right?
But no, a curiosity. A curiosity about his work. No, just a curiosity. Is he breeding them to become more tame as well, or he's just breeding them in the wild?
Oh, they are in a sort of they are domesticated, but they are not hand tamed.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because
you can't pet them unless you train them to be petted. You can't pet them, right? They will give you space when you walk in the flock. They will give you 12 or 15 meters.
Yeah. No, the reason I ask is because Brazil, there are very few farmers raising deers, but they're very difficult to tame, and they jump very high fences, even if they are electrified. But they are...
Yeah, red deer is, it came from the wild just 50 years ago, but the reindeer has been in a semi-domestic form for thousands of years, so they have an affinity to mankind. Okay. They're not nearly as skittish. But anyway, I have another example from Norway, which is the opposite. There was a new sheep farmer, started 3 years before I went to help him in the lambing. And they had some harness on some ewes. The reason was that they had prolapse, or they had prolapse the last year. And I said, why if they had a prolapse last year, why didn't you cull them? And he said, nobody told me we can do that. And I said, here you are selling something to the butcher every year. So you have sold nice young females and kept this thing with a harness on it, right?
Yeah, she has proved that she's not worth it, but she stayed. And the other ones that could prove themselves better, he sold them.
Yes, because the advisory there was no advisor that thought this was a problem. and I asked him to look through the papers because this farm had 8 of those animals with a harness for prolapse harness.
Wow.
And I asked him, look through the papers. And of course, it's a very more than heritable. It's a very repeatable thing. If they happen once, it will happen again. But it's also heritable. So I asked him to look. And out of these 8, 5 was the mother of one of the other ones. In one case, it was grandmother, mother, and daughter. Or it was a grandmother and mother and 2 daughters, and then that was 4 of them. And then one more was a daughter of one of the others. So 5 out of the 8. It's outrage, right? It could have been avoided. And I asked him, now that you know that it's repeatable and heritable, if I ask you, can you kill them after they raise the lamb, after we do all this unnecessary work this time, you kill them, you cull them on the end of the season, and you will have 1 next year, or 2 or 1, and he did so, and he had 1, and of course he sent that one to slaughterhouse again, and then I stopped working with his brother-in-law, so I don't know what happened after that, but it's like things that are too easy to avoid. I am of the opinion that they should have the harness, and you should help them during that season. You fed them all the way to here, and you sort of owe it to yourself to do the work and get the lamb and sell the mother and the lamb to slaughter and be done with it, right? But that's that. Advisors were talking about absolute growth, and they had no idea, no mention of culling anything that wasn't quality.
Yeah, it's challenging.
So,
I was talking to a guy. And just to give you a context, people usually sell a hog or a dam or a lamb. It's pretty much the same price of the meat, so it will be about $500 to $700, depending on conditions, age, weight, that sort of stuff. And you can if you buy a few, you can actually get for $700. You can get registered animals, or animals that someone that raises registered animals are actually selling away, which it might be a problem. But I was arguing with a guy that said, look, if I have an animal that gave me a problem, I'm happy to eat it and buy another one for the same price. And then he said, well, but you might just be swapping problems. I said, no, because this one, I know for sure that's not good enough. The other one might be.
Yes, but
and he was puzzled. But
if you kill an animal, okay.
He was puzzled. He was puzzled because he couldn't see what I was saying. So this animal, for me, if I have reason to cull it, I know it's a cull, so I can eat this one, and the other one might not be. It might be worse, but it might be better. But this one, I know that it's a culling anyway. And he was puzzled with the fact that I prefer to go after another one that I don't know than to stay with the problem that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, so my take is that if you have a young one that's a daughter of someone without problem, you keep that one and cull the one with the problem. But if you don't have a young one from a better one, even the daughters of the bad one is better than the bad one. Because the bad one, the problem. The daughter may have it, but the one that already has the problem is, it. The other one, you can suspect it. And also there's a fact that every lamb has 50% of the genetics from the sire. So if there's a problem, if the sire selection is right, any problem will get diluted over time, especially when you're both culling in a reasonable way and breeding from those that don't get culled. And you can select more intensely from what you're breeding. The ones you're breeding from, you can select more intensely than what you can afford to cull.
Before we go into more specifics about more breeding, I've heard you saying once that culling is just one part of the equation, but it's not. You're not actually actively working in your breeding if you're only culling. You have to know the other side of the equation, which is what to choose and how to mix them and that sort of stuff. But just wrap up the culling. So how you go about culling, just to finish that story, like the worst one, and you teach people.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a worst one. So for me, the ones that are aggressive or nervous go first, and then the ones that are documented health problems. So you know that it had a prolapse or a retained placenta or lost a lamb or would have lost a lamb if you didn't help it, or had a difficult birth or something like that. And the interesting part, I usually say, if you cull the bottom 15% for each of these, then you're going to be fine, right? And people say, if you put 10 different problems and you cut 15% from each of them, you take away 150%. But that doesn't happen because it's the same animals. If you write the retained placenta and the difficult birth, it's often the same one. Or if you have a prolapse and the difficult birth is the same one. Or you have a difficult birth and a lamb that you need to help in order to start drinking milk. It's the same thing, right? It's two problems, or is one problem coming from the other? One interesting time I went through the records. I was someone wanted me to cull from records the entire flock. It was over 500 animals. I went through the records. I culled everything with a screaming fault, the worst faults. And then after that, I culled the ones that had an unacceptably small lamb, or lost lambs, or had unacceptable small lambs. And then these guys, they followed their old routine and they went through and checked the udder of each and every individual. And they did that the week after I was there, and the farmer called me and says, it looks like mob breeding takes away any other problems.
Yeah, because again, the holistic management thing, because you went to the root cause. You're not dealing with symptoms.
Yeah, it's not for everyone, right? Let's say it like this: there are certain people that are good with horses, and there are certain people that are good with tractors. And it's often not the same people. So the last 70 years of technology and fossil fuel has led to that people that are good with cars and tractors get the upper hand in society, and we just want revenge from that and come back with people with animal eye, right? Like people that get respect because they can handle animals. But my point is that people have a lot of different skills. And they don't all. Mankind has a lot of skills, and they don't fit in one person, all of them. So it's safe to say that it's easier for some people. Like if you say it's a virtue to get up early in the morning, and then you realize for half of the population it's very easy, for half of the population it's very hard. So the ones that get up early, it's not because we are good, it's because we are made that way. So there are certain anyone can get better at something, right? But let's say that develop the eye for livestock, it takes many years, and you need someone that points, and you need and and it's
You need-
easy
you-
to.
You
It's
need a
easier to
mentor.
teach that.
You need a mentor,
You
and
need
you
a
need
mentor.
exposure to
You need
to the situations.
you need mentors and
Yeah.
exposure and talent, and one is multiplying the other. So if you don't have talent, the other things don't help. So, but what I'm saying that anyone can raise livestock anyway, because if you're not a raving idiot, you can find the worst animal, and that's all that you need.
Yeah, every crop or every season you look at the worst. Again, if you have a controlled breeding season, they will all come at once. It's easier for you to spot, like this is the smallest one, this is the slowest one, this is the skinnier or whatever. Yeah,
When it comes
makes
to
makes
wool
sense.
sheep, you can see the wool quality. You can spot the worst wool quality without knowing anything about wool. When it comes to hair sheep, you can see the glossy ones are good, right?
Yeah.
And our sheep back home, they have a glossy face and glossy legs, and then they have wool on the rest. But you can see there's always something to look at. But the point is that finding the smallest or the weakest, anyone can do that. And when it becomes difficult, it doesn't matter anymore.
Because you have risen the average.
The average rises very fast when you remove the worst one. When they remove the second worst one, you have less marginal effect, and so on and so on. In the middle, it doesn't matter at all. And if you cull from the bottom up, you never go to the middle. But my point is that in the middle, they're all good.
Yeah.
Usually, if you look on weights, for example, if you go 10% below the average, you have really good animals. And lower than that, you have sorry animals. And that in turn means that if you cull the bottoms 15%, you have a good flock. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about, when it comes to the best mothers, I'm not talking about the top 3 or the top 5. I'm talking about the top 85. So if you have a sheep with 7 lambs in the history, first of all, she lost none of them, and all of them was in the top 85%. That means you have a damn good sheep. Not all of them needs to be above average. Just you need them to not have any sorry lambs.
Bjorn, again, people go to this extreme to look for the extraordinary, with the excuse that you need one ram because your ram will make most of your flock. I think this would be a nice way to go to the positive side, because we've been talking about how to cull, it's fine, but now how to breed, and in your way of breeding, we don't need to fall for the trap of having one big and expensive ram to do all of the job. So how come? How does it? Maybe first, why more breeding, and then how more breeding?
The ram is half of the flock.
That's what
true.
People keep selling. Yeah,
that's true. The ram is half of the flock because it's half of the genetics of the lambs. But if you have 7 rams or 70 rams, the rams are half the flock.
All of the rams, yes.
Yeah. So,
well, with varying degrees, because some of them will breed more than others.
Yes, true. But if all of them meet the minimum requirement for a ram, it doesn't matter which one of them is the father of each lamb, because we know they're all good. We know they're all good enough.
Okay, so
I never put 70. Just for the record, I never ever released 70 rams in one flock. But there was a time I put 49 rams in one flock.
Okay, but before even going there, what is a good ram? What is, like you said, well, if all of them are fine, if all of them are good rams, then there's no problem. How do you define what a good ram is?
So there's two elements to this. The first one is all the knowledge we have about it, the mother of the ram. If we keep decent records, we know what she did when she was 1 year old, and I expect her to raise either one or two lambs when she's 1 year old. If she lambs the first time when she's 2 year old, she is not going to have sons in breeding. So her daughters are welcome, but her sons are not welcome. That means this ewe that only lambs the first time when she's 2 years old, she will have extremely little influence in the flock over time. But then I have another one. She lambs when she's 1 year old. She raises her lamb. Then she raises two lambs when she's 2 year old and two lambs more when she's 3 year old. So she had 3 chances to fail, and she succeeded 3 times. All her 5 lambs survived, and all her 5 lambs were above the 85% mark. So then I call her a good ewe. If she happened to have a son or two in that specific year, let's say in the year 25. In the year 25 breeding season, I realize I have a ewe that's 3 years old. She's got 2 sons. I have another ewe that's 3 years old. She meets the minimum requirements. She's got 1 son. I have a few ewes that have 2 daughters. Well, they're not part of this year's game, right? But if they make it next year, even better, because then she has raised 7 lambs without a problem. So minimum 3 years without failing. And by without failing, I mean weaning in the top 85% with no individual help. Simple as that.
No care. She gives birth, she nurtures, and the lamb bounces back, and there she goes, and all you need to do is to tag it.
The only thing you do is tagging the lamb. And what we come to do, what my people that listen to me, what they have started doing is to tag female lambs with 2 tags and male lambs with 1 tag.
You might have muffled your microphone. Sorry.
It's still muffled?
No, it's good.
Okay, so what some of the farmers, I call them my farmers, but let's say you can't own a farmer any more than you can own a cat, right? Farmers do what they like. They listen to me because they want to. So
you're saying
yes,
that your farmers, they listen to you because they want.
Yes. So some farmer that listen to me put 2 tags for every female lamb, 1 tag for every male lamb. And this is because the rules in Sweden is that the lambs for slaughter only need 1 tag. So the rams we choose for breeding, they get another tag because they stay in the flock until next spring or next summer. So we have a sheep that meets the minimum requirements. In a flock of 100 sheep, we will have something like 30 sheep that meets the minimum requirement. Since all of these have twins, we are likely to have 30 rams. So we put all these 30 rams in a pen. We call them the candidates. And then it's time for the workshop. Because I often have a workshop in that particular situation, because it empowers everyone to be able to choose. When it's their turn, they pick the worst ram. So first goes the concrete worker, then goes the journalist, then goes the architect, then goes the plumber that happens to wonder what we are doing. What on earth are you doing? And we go like, hey, come and pick the worst ram here. And they nail it. Without anything, they will always find the worst. And then yeah, some young farmers, the farmer who owns the place will pick one, and we take turns. And once in a while, it's my turn. I pick the worst. And then it starts getting difficult. The first 7, easy. First 8, well, I pick one. First 9, I pick one again, maybe. Maybe the farmer has an opinion, or usually the farmer's father sees that. So we're down to 21. And we send one of the young men in, chase the flock around a bit, because now they're like stagnant. They have their own place. Have them move around the circle, and they move around the circle, and we maybe find one more, or maybe we're done. We end up with 20 or 21 rams.
Just the dog's going crazy here. I'm with you.
So we end up with 20 or 21 rams, right? And because when it becomes difficult to find one with a fault, they're all good.
Yeah.
And then those are the ones that get released into the flock at the appropriate breeding season, which is typically 2 months later. So we like to choose the rams on the weaning day, because that's when their sons are supposed to be ready for slaughter. We don't care how we don't care how beautiful they are later on. We want them to be acceptable lambs at the time of normal slaughter age, normal slaughter weight. So we have those 20. Now, I know that I am not perfect. If I am not perfect, how can people that are not me be perfect? It's impossible. So we did not pick every fault from this flock, but we took the vast majority of observable faults. Let's say out of these 20 rams, one has a little bit weak, the connection between foot and leg on the back is a little weak. And we couldn't see that. But when they are running around sniffing at the ewes, and when they're fighting, because they're fighting and fighting, right? They have 2 months of nothing but fighting and playing and fighting again and playing and fighting and once in a while eating. If there is a structural problem in one of them, nature will identify it. And let's put them they look good. Okay, all of them look good. We put them with the ewes. They walk around sniffing. The ones that have a harm or hurt somewhere will be good in the start of the breeding season, but they will fall out. So on average, the ones with good sound structure will have more lambs. So nature and the competition between the rams helps us to identify, or rather, we don't care about the identification, but we get more progeny from the good. Let's say that some of these have subpar fertility. It can happen even in sheep. It doesn't matter, because each and every one of these female sheep is covered by 7 rams. And of course, when we are doing mob breeding, all rams have the same color or the same type. But I have seen a place where someone had hundreds of black-faced, white wool and black-faced sheep. And he put 3 rams there. 1 South African Dorper, 1 Suffolk, and 1 Texel. And so the Texel makes his lambs white. The Dorper makes his lambs black and white. And the Suffolk make them just like the mother. And in all of these twins and triplets in that entire flock of nearly 700 sheep, you struggle to find a pair of twins with the same sire, because they are different colors, and that was just 3 rams. So each and every one of those ewes were covered by at least 2, probably 3 of those 3 rams. So imagine when I put 49 or 79 rams in one flock, there is no excuse for a sheep to not lamb.
Just give me 1 sec there. So you do not put a harness on them to identify which one is quote unquote the winner. Like
Because
which
we
ram,
don't care.
and you don't care because the outcome of the entire flock is better than the outcome of each singular individual within the flock. Is that correct?
Yes. So what happens is that over time, you can't really pinpoint that good animals have more progeny, but you know that bad animals have less progeny. And that's all we care for. So the boys of next year will not be from equal proportions from all the rams. There will be fewer sons from the bad rams or the rams that had some hidden fault. So over time, the ones with a strong libido, with a strong hormonal balance, the ones that have the best body condition at the start of the breeding season will push through. And ones that are in a little bit worse shape, it shows more and more, right? So they fall out. They can't handle the competition. So basically, stamina is part of it.
In a way, you homogenize the average, and you naturally single out the bad ones.
Yeah, because the next year we do the same selection procedure. We cull the ewes that have poor progeny, and we cull the bottom third. I have not ever said that we need to cull the bottom third, but that is what happens. So if we need to cull the bottom half, we cull the bottom half. But that has never happened. 2/3 are good. It's like it's probably part of how close we can identify it. So anyway, usually 2/3 of the candidates go on, and they sire unequal proportions of the next year's lambs. So over time, it changes the compositions of genetics, and it happens fast from father to son, and slow from father to daughter, because the daughter is not going to come back until 3 years later. So the gene flow from father to son is fast. It's 1 year. The gene flow from father to daughter, father to grandson, it's grandfather to grandson is 3 or 4 years. But then again, whatever passes through the female side is well tested. It's much better tested than what comes from the male line. So we build upon what we built, and it gets better and better and easier.
Two comments. One is probably this ratio is also matches what you say, that you want to have 80% of your good lambs coming from 20% of your labor, which means that you want to solve all of your problems within 20% of your time, or 80% of your problems.
20%,
so you have
20% of the work goes to 80% of the profit, and 80% of the work goes to 20% of the profit, which means and that always happens. So until they're all good. But I'm saying that if you have a flock with a lot of problems, you spend a lot of time curing problems. If you have a flock with few problems, you spend very little time to cure the problems. But the fact remains that most of the work is dealing with those few with a problem.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, what I'm observing is not actually, I'm not saying, I'm just observing that the average that goes on is sort of roughly the same thing that you say when you're trying to get rid of the ones that cause you extra work.
Yeah, the average production goes up very slowly, and the average production goes up slowly, and the average amount of problem decreases fast.
Now, one question so that you can move on with your explanation. And you never stay with the same rams from one season to the next. You always change all of them.
Oh, only on one conditions we use the same rams again. Is that if pure luck or pure chance means that we don't have any decent rams. This can happen if all the good ewes have daughters. But this does not happen in a flock that's more than 20 sheep. So if you have a very limited numbers of sheep, it could theoretically happen that you have to use the same rams again. But nothing else happens that you waste 1 year. Your culling continues and everything, you have good rams. So you just use them again, and the next year they have sons, and then it moves on, right? But typically we change the rams, all the rams every year, and we only change some of the sheep every year. They use every year.
Okay.
We only cull the bottom. So the ewes are more consistent, and the rams are replaced all the time. But it's the same old genetics minus the bad ones.
Bjorn, let me see if I understood it correctly. So we go for all of the evident, all of the easy ones to cull. We thought that's the weakest one, the skinniest one, the sickest one. We go culling all of them. So one part of the thing is get rid of the sick ones or the weak ones. But you also say something that is very important for small farmers, which is the ones you decide to cull, you don't need to cull them straight away. They can still produce for you, or you can still stay with them for a few seasons if you need the money. But that goes
if your average female, if the quality of your females is not good enough, so you can simply not cull everything with a problem. You prioritize and you keep them for production. Just make sure you don't take sons from them. Yeah, and you cannot take sons, since you have principles for ram selections. If a ewe is losing a lamb 1 year, you can still keep her in the flock, but she will never have sons in breeding.
Just watch out for your mic, please. So let me just move. That's one side of the equation. The other side is every year at lambing time, at weaning time, we choose, we call the worst ram lambs. So skinniest one, weird one, skinny one, whatever. And then we keep all of the ones
like they say in South Africa. We remove the dinks and freaks.
That's it. And then we do a breeding season, let's say 34 days, like 2 cycles. All of them together. Don't care which one does what, just stays there. Then I call all of these and wait for the next one, or sell them for the farmers or whatever. And then next year I choose again from the lambs. So yes. Is that a fair summary of the mob breeding?
That's a fair summary. So what then happens is that when I first started, I did mob breeding in cattle before I did it in sheep. So what the first time that we did the ram selection with sheep, the foreman at the farm said, I think we should cull a bit for weight as well. I mean, there's plenty of rams here. We could say that we remove the lightest ones.
Okay.
And I said, okay, fair. But let me first ask you one question. We had then took away the bottom third of the candidates. And I said, look up the weaning weight. They were all weighed the same day, right? We have the weights on the individuals. I said, look up the weaning weights. If you find anything that below average, let's call them. I mean, it wasn't what I was intending, but I had the idea that if they're better than minus 10%, they're good enough, because they're around average, and the poor ones are gone. And he said, okay, fair. I will cull whatever is under the average. But there was no one under the average.
And how did you go about it?
Because we already culled them for various reasons, for visual appraisal. And the average of the flock, mind you, this is very important. The average of the flock is every first year sheep with one lamb. It's every sorry sheep with one lamb, and it's all the good sheep with 2 lambs, all together. And our candidates after culling are all twins. So being a twin is a major disadvantage in terms of weight. But despite that they're all twins, they're all above the average. And I looked at this many times since then, because this is 7 years ago. Every time, all of the best 2/3, the ones that resisted the culling of the candidates, all of them are above flock average. And then what's the point of culling more for weight, because they're above average? Part of this is because they have good mothers and got more milk and started better, but part of this is that removing the sorry doers is actually breeding for weight, or rather it's breeding against poor. It's not breeding for growth, but it's breeding against poor growth, which kind of leads to the same thing.
Yeah, my feeling about this is that once we start culling the bottom 15, 20%, or even 30%, it doesn't matter what is that you are actually breeding for, because you're getting, like you say this all the time, like the best ewe is an average ewe without any problems. So by the time you take by the time you take 20 or 30% of all the problems, and probably all these problems are genetically intertwined anyway.
There is a genetic, there's a tendency of genetics in there.
Yeah.
With animals, it's always more nutrition and chance and blah blah. But we treated all of them the same, so we make heritability better, because they're all born in the same time in the spring, and they all suffered the same rains.
And whatever, I was about to say that, and because you did that in a very short breeding season, however bad or good your conditions are to express or not any genes, will be the same for all of them. So it's level ground anyway, because even if your farm is degraded and is still improving, all of them went through the same environmental conditions.
Yeah, so they got, the outer environment was the same, and the maternal environment was different. And a strong part of what we're doing is we're helping good maternal environment to rise to the top. And some of what we're doing is individual genetics rising to the top. And it's very hard to separate, but with sheep, it's often 80% or 70% is maternal genetics. So we get a little bit of growth, we get a little bit of breeding for growth, and we get a lot of breeding for good maternal genetics. What doesn't matter, because the production model is that the lambs are supposed to be ready at weaning day, which is in our environment 4 months after lambing. If they are not big enough, okay, you wait until they are big enough, but we should have a monitoring point, and weaning day is the best monitoring point in my book.
No, it sounds very, once you put it this way, and once you accept that you're not looking for individual performance, but you're looking at building flock performance, It makes it easier to understand. You don't care about the individual. It's about the average. It's about rising the average performance. And like you say in the beginning, your profitability per area of production. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we remove an unproportionally big part of the work and the grief and the hassle, and we keep all of the profit. We raise the profit a little, we raise the income a little, but we reduce the cost a lot.
Yeah. Bjorn, I have a situation in Brazil that is similar to yours in the peace sheep project. So let me give you. I'll give context for the Brazilian farmers, Brazilian sheep farmers. In Brazil, we have the Texel sheep. It's becoming very popular. It's somehow one of the I would say one of the most used or one of the most farmed breeds. We have some Lincoln sheep. We have what's the name of the French one? The Ile de France. It's quite popular as well. Some people breed the one with the black face. Yeah, but anyway, we have a lot of text. Yes, Suffolk, and there's another one as well. I forgot the name. I think it's a French one too. But my point is this: Rambouillet. No,
yeah.
forgot that.
They're all white. Okay.
Yeah. But context being this, because of the associations, the breeding associations, the genetic is getting very very weak because people are feeding them and putting them indoors and feeding them a lot and propping them too often. So we don't actually understand the effects, but we know that it's getting worse. And then, okay, so we have in Brazil a sheep that's very similar to the what's the name, the Navajo sheep in the US. So it is a sheep that came with the Spanish, and it went feral. So we call them in Brazil Creole sheep. They come in, tones of gray, black, and white. Some of them have 4 horns, usually the males. They have long wool. It's not a particularly good wool, but they are very parasite resistant because they went feral. Basically, they went feral and then they recovered the breed. Now, we have some people crossing breeds, and you get the, what's the name in English? Heterosis? Is that the biological term? Yeah.
Yeah, heterosis.
Yeah, you get heterosis in the F1 lambs. That's fine. But let's say we want to keep on moving and combining best of these two worlds, because it's similar to your situation. You want the pelt from the Gotland sheep, and you want the early maturity and feed conversion.
And we especially want the extra muscling from our type of texel.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. It's very similar because the Creole sheep, they're small, late maturing, but they're very, very resistant. So just as an exercise of mob breeding, let's say I want to do something like you did, which is I want to have that pelt, which is not particularly good in terms of wool, but the pelt in itself sells very well because it's colorful, it's long wool, and people buy it. So I want that pelt, but I want that with the weight and early maturity of the texel. How can we develop this project?
So first of all, you need to crossbreed. And when you get the first progeny of the crossbreeding, they will all look more or less the same. They will be halfway between the parents plus some little heterosis. And they will all be white because the texel is a white breed, and the white is a dominant genetic factor. So that's the easy part, right? You get hordes of polled and white sheep. That's the first thing that happens. So, okay, what do we do with the next generation? Well, the easiest part, we breed the crossbreed to the crossbreed. And since we are also a commercial flock, we breed the crossbreed to the pure breed. So let's say we have a Texel.
Which is which? Which crossbreed with which crossbreed bred and...
So you have a 50-50 crossbreed.
Okay.
So you put them, for commercial reasons, you put them with your other sheep as well, right? Instead, or you can either decide to make more crossbreeds by keeping a Texel ram on the pure breeds. If you have a churro, not a churro,
Creole.
Yeah, Creole. So either you make more crossbreeds from the older sheep, or you simply put the crossbred rams on everything. So let's say you start with a Texel flock, and you put the crossbreeds on the Texel ewes. You will still get big white. You will still get big white lambs from that. They will have some Creole genetics, but you can't actually see it, right? But when you put the crossbreed to the crossbreed, some of them will start to be, you will get colors and shapes all over the place.
And that F2
more,
or F3? F3.
And F2 I'm talking about, like the crossbreed, the crossbreeds with each other, some certain animals with color shows back up. So if that color is important, in the second generation, in the F2, you use the ones with color and put them back on the flock. If the color doesn't matter, you select for more other things, right? But that's the first thing that happens. Colors comes out, and you get different wool. You don't get anything that looks like the grandparents, but you get them different. You get a tendency, because here and there you have more Creole wool genetics. Here and there you have more Texel genetics. It happens at the same time in different ways in different individuals. So you can select. And you want that long wool. So you find them those with a tendency to long wool, and you put the back on the average on all the females, and which on the average of all the previous females on all the new females. You put the rams from the newest generations, the one you selected, and you start over, and nature will surprise you with more color and more long wool if you did the selection right. So at some point you will get some, and the horns will come back out here and there. For example, if you're interested in horns, every time you use a polled ram, you decrease the genetics for horns. Every time you use a horned ram, you increase the genetic for horns. Even if being polled is a genetically dominant trait, you change the numbers, you change the frequencies of the genetics. So that is basically what makes selection work. The frequency in each sheep is different, and by using those that follow your taste, you get more of those in the next generation. But maybe 50-50 is not the right way to go. Maybe you want it, in order to get anywhere with the pelts, maybe you need 75% Creole. Because all that depends on your eye.
But hang on a sec. Look, I'll give you a context again. The Creole might come in 3 or 4 colors. I'm not concerned about the colors. I'm just happy to have different colors to sell pelts, because this is a byproduct of my operation. Okay. Now I'm also actually more interested in their parasite resistance and how to say,
general parasite resistance and general thriftiness is
yes.
what we call additive genetics.
Yeah.
The only way of testing them is time. Like, put them on the pasture and see what happens, and the cream will rise to the top, right?
So that was one context. So I don't care if I have maybe, say I get like 2 or 3 Creole rams to put on 15, 20 Texel sheep, just as an exercise. I don't really care about the colors. It's just an extra if I sell the pelts later on. What I want is parasite resistant thriftiness, like you said, resilience, grass fed. They have very good grass conversion because they've been raised outside. But I want that with the early maturity and weight gain of the Texel sheep. So
yeah, so both that's the interesting part here, is that colors are either or. They are so-called qualitative genetics, right? While growth and thriftiness and fertility and maturing rate and things like that, they are, first of all, there are many genetics involved, so it's additive genetics. It's not either or. It's not thrifty or not thrifty, but it's like it identifies as a continuum where you can call the bottom 15%, or whatever you feel like. But size is mainly the proportions of the grandparents. If the grandparents are 3 Creole and 1 Texel, you will get less growth and less early maturity. If it's the other way around, you get more of the Texel traits. If you start with 50-50, have selection favors one side, you will get more of that side.
Can you repeat
the wool
that,
will
please?
get longer if you select for long wool.
Sorry, can you repeat that bit there, because I lost you there for a sec. Sorry.
So
you're talking about the grandparents.
Yeah, so the proportions of the grandparents tell you what you can expect from the progeny, but over time selection changes those proportions. So whatever if you have the genetics present in the gene pool and you select for them, you will get more of them. And when it comes to thriftiness and maturity and things like that, that will be a slow process. It doesn't identify immediately. But when you consistently work in the same direction, you will eventually get something that is a new breed and that has certain things from one of the old breeds that you enjoy. So let me give you a good example where it's easy. You have one breed of chickens that have blue eggs and one that have white eggs. Then you cross them, and you cross progeny for an F2, and in the F2 you simply select the ones that come from a blue egg, and then you're kind of fast there. But when you have quantitative genetics like growth and thriftiness, you have hundreds of genetics at the same time, so it's a slow process, but it can still be done. It just takes 4 generations, more observation. So
and it's
all the breeds. All the breeds come from one of 2 scenarios. Either they're a part of an older breed, or someone decided to cross 2 breeds and select. That's how every breed developed once in time, right?
Yeah.
So anyone can start a new breed.
And it's a myth that if you keep crossbreds, they're gonna get weaker. And it's also a myth that if you inbreed them, they're gonna get weaker. They only get weaker if you're not culling. Am I right?
Yes, because the average genetics is the same as one generation as the next if everyone contributes. But if you remove the weak ones, you change the average and you get them stronger at the same time as the heterosis get out. You get more and more good genetics. If you do that with offensively enough, you have something called the Bulmer effect, which basically is that selection was so strong that there was no inbreeding depression. And this is very common in mob breeding. Nobody sees them getting weaker.
What's the effect again? Bulmer with an L.
Bulmer effect is when the expected dip in production because of inbreeding does not show up, because the selection counters it. And the thing is that it's with inbreeding, it's the average. The way inbreeding is measured, it's with random matings. But in a farm, there is no such thing as a random mating. You remove the weak ones. So inbreeding depression is observable in the laboratory, but very difficult to find at all. Under proper selection, it doesn't exist. So if you have proper selection, which means you select for fertility and thriftiness, there is no inbreeding depression. It doesn't exist that way.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hear you say that, because people keep repeating what they hear. So the F1 is a very good situation, but after that, everyone keeps repeating that you go downhill if you keep crossbreeding them. And I think that is only true if you don't know how to cull and if you don't know how to select. Because
that's
it. Yeah. And it makes sense.
There are places.
In nature, it would be like that as well. In nature, there's no separation of brothers and sisters. It's just the most adapted one, the one that has better feed conversion, the one that's early maturing. That's the one that goes forward. Nobody goes there to say, you come this way, you go that way.
For example, with the deer, they're fighting aggressively over territory. And they have their time the deer have their time to shine. And when they get a little older, they are pushed out by something else. That's often enough their son.
Yeah.
Which means that Bambi's maternal grandfather is Bambi's paternal grandfather. It's the same damn deer.
Yeah.
And Bambi still grows up to be a deer, right? So, because all of them were fit, because nature selected them. They were fighting all the time. They were competing all the time. So there are examples of this. All the feral water buffalo in Australia come from 7 individuals that saved themselves when a ship sank. There are thousands of them now, and all of them are fit because they compete. And there is an island called Kerguelen where French scientists put 1 male mouflon sheep and 1 female mouflon sheep, and the population grew to about 700, and it crashed in a bad winter and went down to 400, and then it pulsing like that. And measured genetic diversity is stronger now than when they started.
My lessons from all of this, Bjorn, is that the way you do things is way more similar to nature, and
yes,
and for me,
it's natural selection within a framework given by man. Because nature doesn't care what the animal look like, but we want them to be a good carcass for the slaughterhouse, or we want a good wool or something like that, or care about color or something. But we make a framework without predators. We feed them in the winter, things like that, but they still compete. We just let them compete, and we simply measure what happens, right?
Yeah, but my point is that you do it nature's way, with some adaptation. Of course, we need to be viable, but you do that without attachment. And the guys that are saying that they are actually improving breeds are actually destroying them,
With
and they
attachment.
are, yeah, with attachment. That's my observation.
So the thing is, as long as it's possible to feed an animal to better performance, there's a temptation.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, just for the record, mob breeding can be done in any environment. So let us say that our environment is a place where you have unlimited pellets for every sheep. You have one corner. You have an area for the sheep. One corner has lucerne hay. One has unlimited pellets. One has crushed maize. One has or whole maize, but it's been someone dipped it in water and fermented it, so it's easy to chew. They have maize in one corner, lucerne pellets in one corner, and so on, right? Unlimited hay. Everything is production heaven for sheep. And mob breeding still works. This scenario may not be the most profitable, but mob breeding will give you a different kind of sheep anyway compared to what the conventional breeders are doing. Because they are still going to, and we can select for, it's not mob breeding if the only selection criteria is absolute growth. But we can have a scenario where we can change mob breeding to a point where individual growth matters more or less.
And I got you. Even if they're going the industrial way or the industrial paradigm, if they mob breed, they will have better animals, better feed conversion, better ways.
A lot better anyway, right?
Yeah.
But there's always temptation to use an individual with a better individual performance where you don't care about the rest. So as for us, I mean, let's say one mob breeder is not giving any supplements, the other one is giving supplements. The outcome will be different, but both will be strong sheep. It's just the one that don't get supplement will have a bigger room and he will have a stronger personal appetite. He will eat more. He will convert better. So it's nothing. None of that is set in stone. But the point is that we need to do natural selection within our framework. And we need to make sure that when we sell a breeding animal, we tell the others what our framework is.
And by our framework, I want to make this clear for people listening to us or watching us later. You're talking about strictly grass-fed, healthy animals in a holistically planned grazing system. Is that what you're talking about as a framework?
Well, that's my framework. But my framework also has something called winter feeding when conditions are rough. So typically,
you don't feed grains.
Generally not. There are some of us, or some of the mob breeders will feed grain during lambing because of the extremely good marginal effect of doing that. At the time when the unborn lamb takes up a lot of room capacity, that means room and capacity is little, then it's good marginal effect to feed grain, and they stop feeding grain once the last lamb is born, and then it's all grass fed, right? And there are some that never feed any grain, and it's just about communication. When you sell breeding animal, you tell people what they did, right? What you did. So in my context, or our context, most of us will be all forage as long as there is not too much snow. And when it's too much snow, when the sheep can no longer dig productively, then they get fed. In Brazil,
usually
you don't get that kind of snowpack.
no. In Brazil, what's crazy in Brazil, Bjorn, is that people are selling. They call it grass fed, but it's not, because they give grains in winter, which is not necessary because we don't have snow. We do have below zero temperatures in many areas in the south of Brazil, but because it's not snowing, we actually have the C3 grasses. We have, we have all of the forbs and the nitrogen fixes, ryegrass, and all of those things that are actually much better quality. But in what's going on in Brazil?
Yes, the C3 grasses and the clovers and forbs and all that come back in your cooler season, they are better protein, better forage quality than the C4 grasses that show up in the warm season.
Yeah, but because of most people lack a grazing management, they come with inputs in wintertime. But my point in Brazil is that's crazy. People are selling as grass fed, but animals, cattle or sheep, they are grazing in crop residue of GMOs and chemicals. It's crazy. But it's sold as grass fed.
It's not grass fed, it's just outdoor animals.
Yeah. But they market this way anyway. But I got what you're saying. The framework. We need to talk about framework. So I was visiting a farmer nearby. He was raising Creole sheep for about 20 years. The grazing management is not what I like, but it's his framework, it's not mine, so I can't judge. But he was actually doing something that not many Brazilians are doing, which is he only drenched those who needed. Because in Brazil, it's getting very common to drench every 3 months all of the flock anyway, just for the sake of it. So they're actually raising weaker animals and decreasing their soil capacity, because once you drench all of your animals and put them in set stock again, you are putting your soil backwards with all of the...
In words of one of my African friends, you're breeding tick-resistant ticks. You're not breeding tick-resistant animals. You're breeding tick medicine.
Chemical resistant ticks.
Ticks. Yes.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Let me now show you. I am not a fanatic. I am part of all the parts, right? I am in this game.
So the shows.
I'm in this game. but I mean, I get that I am not a fanatic. So if external inputs actually help, I think you're free to use them. But what I'm saying is that a system that relies on external inputs is not a regenerative system. So, and if you do it right, you can use external input to boost your regenerative process. But most of the time, you're using the inputs to camouflage a problem in the management. So, for example, in your situation where the forage quality can be better in the winter, if you have a proper forage management, use some netting and control where the sheep are grazing, and when they're not grazing, the inputs, if you ever need them, should be in the summer when you don't have enough protein in the grass. But then you're probably most of the farmers in your area are probably selectively grazing instead.
So they should grazing. So they should. And drenching a lot during summertime, because we have the opposite time.
Maybe harvest C3 forage to use as a supplement in the summer. And they could even harvest C4 forage in the summer to supplement in the winter when the protein on the ground is better. Boost the energy, and the protein on the ground is good. So people have often a very strange perspective on things.
Yeah. I like the holistic management framework, because you try to you try to thrive with as little input as possible and work with processes rather than inputs. So
Yeah.
I'm more, I like it that way better. Let me ask you quick questions about scale. I'm interested in scales of time and scales of flock. Now, say I have 20 sheep. I'm supposing here that within 3 years I have a pretty good result doing mob breeding.
That will work.
If I have about 100 sheep, that will maybe work even faster because you can cull more the first couple of years.
What happens in the start of mob breeding? Long before you have any number of stronger grown-up sheep, you have the lamb crop is bouncing up anyway. If the paternal grandmother of the lamb is one that never lost a lamb, that means she was raising thrifty lambs. It's not only what she did, it's what the lambs did. So the first year you get you get a lot of bouncy and active lambs. In the very first year, you haven't done anything. You just selected better rams. When you do it in the second year, it's going to be more of the same year, because you haven't stacked the genetic. I mean, you stack the genetics of the rams you're using, but you don't stack you don't have time to stack the genetics of the use and yet. But all the rams you use in the first year have one good grandmother. That's it. A quarter of their genetics is the best genetics, and it still shows. In the second year, all the rams have one good mother and one good grandmother. So that means that 37% of the genetics of the lamb is from a good grandmother, a good ewe. Instead of 25, it's 37 and instead, right? And then on the third year, you approach 50, right? And then you don't get over 50 until the third year of the new. I mean, you get improvement in the flock because you're culling, but you don't get improvement in the ram's mother. In the ram's mothers, you don't get an improvement until on the fourth year, when those that have a father from the first mob breeding have sons in mob breeding number 4.
But
in the fifth year, in the fifth year you have yet another bounce, because then you have certain ewes that have both father and grandfather from the first mob breeding, and it stacks and stacks and stacks like that.
I was about to say that if you're doing it right from the fourth year onwards, you have an exponential improvement.
Yes, because then the improvement on the female side and the improvement on the male side like combined. So then you start having lambs with genetics that is more than 50% good. Some of them will be 62 and 75% good, right? But the most stunning thing is, long before you have good use, long before you have a lot of good use, you have a lot of good lambs. That starts immediately from year 1 and 2. So you lose a lot less lambs on the first round. You get these good lambs long before you get anything else. And then maternal effects come after, and it builds up and builds up and builds up. But a lot of this is lamb vigor.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense when you explain that you look at the flock as an organism, the flock as an entity. It makes it easier to understand, because you're not looking at too many details. You're going from large patterns and just going from there. And then once it gets really good, then you can narrow it down and start being being sort of more careful with details. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like when a person start exercising. You get improvement from a week on, right? But nobody sees it. He just feels better. But after a while, he starts exercising every day, and after 3 months, people go, look how strong you have become, right?
Yeah.
And then after he becomes strong, he starts also losing fat, and then after a while, like there's a little by little by little. So the health of the flock is like that person that starts exercising.
Yeah.
The first thing with that person that started exercising, starting sleeping better, and his stomach doesn't hurt and whatever, and he just starts to shine a bit.
Yeah. Positive compounding effects. Yes.
Yeah, compounding effect and feedback loops. So
Bjorn,
people will ask me, what happens when this gets so good that I find nothing to cull?
your life just got easier.
Well, there's always going to be a lower end. And well, that could be the time when you, without noticing, you have actually started to select for growth, or you can tighten selection for quality if you have wool quality or something like that. But mob breeding is more about minimum requirements. It's like my apprentices at the landscaping, right? In the words of Neil Gaiman, when you start a new work, there's only 3 things you need to care about: get there in time, make an effort, and be nice. And 2 of them is enough.
Yeah.
So like over time, when they get better at things, their own, like, they're not apprentices anymore, they're young workers, and well, the pressure is going to be harder, but they are also harder, so it doesn't matter. They're fine with that. On the first day, they only need to care about the 3 things, and then they add skills and they add attitude and so on as they go, right? And 7 years from that, they are going to be really strong, and they will know all the stuff, and they can start planning and start from scratch in projects and stuff, right? But nobody can expect that from the beginning. But it's incremental improvement that over time makes it fantastic.
Yeah. Another thing that I like about your work is, like you said, you're not a fanatic, but you're pretty concerned and dedicated towards holistic management and pasture management and all this management of complexity. Now in Brazil,
which of course, adding to that, any form of agroforestry will help you get more money from the same land, and more regeneration, more soil building. So any of these techniques can be stacked upon each other.
Yeah, and you stack in viability and productivity in the same area, which is, for small farmers, is very important as well. But my question was going towards that area. Small farmers cannot do easily the ultra high density grazing that is becoming popular in Brazil. And I mean, when I say they can't do it, it's not because it doesn't work in small farms. It's just because the number of movements per day in a small farm sometimes won't be justified by the money that you're going to make from that very small flock.
So the smallest ultra high density I have done was 5 meat rabbits in my garden.
It's a pretty good one. Very good feed conversion.
The smallest thing I've seen is or heard of in terms of ultra high density. It was a guy who had guinea pigs in his garden, so he beat me to it, right?
Yeah.
But there is ultra high density is one thing with 5-6 moves, right? I had one guy here in Norway. His name is Anders. He put the electric netting in zigzag, And once they finished the zigzag, he moved the post closest to the sheep. He moved it far away, and then they were eating this square there, and then he gave them another square so that he stood next to it and did it, right? And he had ultra density for 2 hours or something, just observing it. But let's say that there is a world of difference between moving twice a day is very different from moving once a day. So you don't need, I mean, the marginal effect decreases when you do it really often, but even moving twice a day, most people can do it in the morning and in the evening.
I'll give you my experience with that. I was doing twice a day, and I was varying from 700 sheep per hectare to 2,500 to sometimes 300 per hectare with a small mob, but just in density, I'm meaning. So, yes. And I was doing twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. And I did this last year, and in one move, in a small farm, one complete rotation, and it ended up being just about 45 days rest. And I checked all of the grasses with a bricks to see the sugar content. And with one full rotation in a small farm, I doubled the bricks in almost all grasses in one rotation.
Yeah, so it helps anyway, right?
Yeah. No inputs, just management, just electric wire.
More animal impact, and if it would still be selective grazing, but it's less selective. Yeah. And there's more animal impact, which tramples more of the unselected grasses. So you have an unselective effect while it's still selective grazing.
Yeah. Again,
and
what I like
that can make all the difference. Like if the sugar content goes up, the protein content will go up.
Yeah. And again, that's what I like about what I've been seeing about your work and podcasts and videos and your group, is that you ask farmers, what is your context? Because what's happening here is that ultra high density grazing is becoming popular. So everyone wants to do it, but they want to do a copy and paste, and it doesn't work like that. You need to know why you're doing it, and you need to know your animals, why you're doing it, with whom are you doing it. There's many dimensions of variables that people are not looking.
And even one species doesn't do it like the other. It's a tall order to ask sheep to graze unselectively because their natural role is to graze selectively.
Yeah.
But if you have density high enough, they will trample whatever they don't eat, and then you have something that looks like unselective, and you still win.
That's pretty much what I got with two to three movements.
Yeah.
So just to contextualize and get things apart, we talked about high density grazing. We talked about mob breeding. How does mob breeding differs from what Johann Zitzmann's doing?
Well, Johann Zitzmann is speaking of a climate, of a situation which is far worse than mine.
Yeah, he's in the semi-arid.
He's semi-arid, but most of all seasonal rainfall.
Yeah, 3 to 4 months of rain and then it's all dry.
Yeah, so I know what seasonal rainfall looks like. In my home is like that. We have a dry period every summer and a wet. We have a dry spring with moisture from the winter. We have a dry summer without moisture, and then we have a wet autumn, and then we have a cold winter. So I know what it looks like, but we have what Zitzmann calls high octane grasses. We have protein, right? So our environment is less challenging. The minimum requirement of mob breeding for cattle, as I started it, is the whole point of his thing, the minimum requirement that they calve when they're 2 years old, that the sheep lamb when they're 1 year old. That's our minimum requirement. And in the context that Johan was operating in when he was in Zimbabwe, that's simply impossible. You will have no herd left. So he kept a lot of cows that calved the first time when there were 3. But he made sure that the bulls came from the ones that calved when there were 2. And he changed, I believe it was from 40% calving at 2 to 80% calving at 2 in just a few years. So that's our minimum requirement. And a farmer in my country could simply cull everything that didn't calve when it was 2. And there are sheep farms you cannot afford to cull everything that doesn't lamb when it's 1, because sheep are more difficult than cattle. But everywhere you can make improvements if you make sure that the breeding sires come from those that made it lambing at 1, because those are the strong ones, whatever they look like. And of course, Johan makes emphasis that ugly that works is better than beautiful that doesn't work. And well, high here in the high north, in a high, potentially high input system, but most of all high octane grazing. What we most of all discover is that life is easier here.
Yeah, even with the winter, because it's a snow problem, but it's better than no water, no rain. Very, very brittle environment.
Because there's nothing too cold for a sheep. It's like a sheep cannot suffer from cold if it's got something good to eat. Sheep come from mountains of Asia where it's brutally cold and where it's very dry. So sheep suffer more when it's too wet.
We have this problem here.
Yeah. So and typically for sheep, there's been a lot of research where they want to find genetics that has to do with parasite resistance. And most of the time when they're looking for that, they say, but we couldn't find genetics for parasite resistance that was not genetics for a high body condition. And they wanted to isolate it because they're reductionists. But since we are not reductionists, since we are holistic thinkers, actually inherently good, or no, not inherently good body condition, but good body condition is what makes them parasite resistant.
Yeah, which again comes with other variables: grass management, rotations, planning,
feeding.
Yeah,
you can feed animals to become parasite resistant, but it's cheaper to breed animals with an inherently good body condition. And if you look at tropical hair sheep, they typically don't have the best muscularity, but they are always fat. Yeah. So if we breed for inherently good body condition, like Johan tells us, we reduce a lot of problems. There is research from Australia where they bred cattle that are tick resistant. It went to a point they couldn't find any natural ticks on them, so they decided to breed tick nymphs, and they poured 1,000 nymphs on each bull. And there were certain bulls that didn't have one tick attached to them, even they infected them with 1,000. So they bred solely for tick resistance, and as a byproduct, their herd fertility went up by like 12 or 14% points, right? They got adapted cattle. So if you breed for adapted cattle or adapted sheep, you win a lot of other things, like I'm saying in mob breeding, when you select for you select against bad growth, you don't have other problems anymore. If you select for it against retained placenta, you don't have lambing problems and so on, right? It's like most of that, it's considered bad luck. I mean, individual problems, it's considered bad luck by conventional breeders. And of course it's bad luck, but bad luck is highly repeatable, and it's very repeatable, and it's also highly inheritable.
Yeah.
So simply by removing bad luck from the gene pool will over time give animals with good luck.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot.
The problem
makes a lot of sense.
It's not a fast process, because luck is part of it. So weak genetics don't show all the time; they show once in a while, and weak genetics tend to show more in the presence of other weak genetics. So when you remove some of the weak genetics, the result gets a lot better, but you still have weak genetics, and then they show up in another generation, and then you call them there. So it's a never-ending process, and the marginal effect is strong in the beginning and then weaker and weaker, but the result gets better and better.
And it's fast enough that you can increase your profitability within 2 to 3 years if you're doing it right. So you can double your stocking rate, decreasing your workload and increasing your profitability if you do it right. So within 2 or 3 years, I mean, most people would benefit from doing it, especially if they combine mob breeding with holistic management, or even better, at least with a little bit of ultra high density. Even if it's not ultra high density, but if it's high density, is already good enough.
So the thing is, what increases the carrying capacity is good pasture management, and what stops some of the people from managing a bigger flock is all the problematic sheep. So mob breeding removes the problematic sheep, and then the same shepherd that lambs 500 sheep can lamb 1,500 sheep.
Yeah.
Because that is actually numbers from a farm in Great Britain. It's called Logederno. They are breeding 2 forms of sheep. One maternal, where the farmer's daughter is lambing 1,500 sheep, and there's one terminal sire line where the farmer's son is managing 500 sheep and with the same workload.
Yeah. No,
they told me this. I know a lot of people, but I spoke to them at Scott Sheep the other year, and they actually told me this, which I think is their selection criteria for the terminal line is it's thrifty lamb, and they want a lamb that gets up and suckles, and they want muscularity and growth, and they don't care about the other things. And in the maternal line, they think about everything. It's more holistic approach in the maternal line, and the workload is 1/3.
Yeah, what I think we lack here in Brazil is the buying power for the equipment, because you have the management centers that you have there in Europe, all of the gates, the sorting gates, the scales, and all of those things that make life easier for one person to deal with a large number of animals. Here in Brazil, for the small farmers, their cost is still prohibitive, but we're getting there. I'm trying to open source. I'm trying to build one with one of my students, and we are designing it based on models that you have in Europe and in Australia and New Zealand, and we're trying to make it open source. Like, we're going to do it ours. We can't have a factory. I don't want to own a factory, so I'm just going to do mine, and maybe have the plans for people, or sell some of the plans to get the money to build mine. Because what I'm seeing is, if we have the right equipment, we can get to that scale, which is like you can be in a small property, but you can have like maybe 200, 300, 400 sheep, and it's the same work, because you're going to move one fence for 20 or 200. You're going to sort them in a gate. It's going to be the same thing for 20 or 200. So, yeah.
The worst work is to get out there in the morning anyway.
That's right. Especially in the winter. Yeah, that's right. Bjorn, it was a very nice conversation. I've been learning a lot from the things that you've been putting out in podcast videos and all your interactions in your group on Facebook, and also in the farmers group on WhatsApp as well. I want to say thank you for not only your knowledge, but also the way you go about things. I like it very much. Non-attached. Look, just go and test, check for yourself, develop your own metrics, see if it works. If it doesn't work, just drop it, do something else. But from my small experience and from my studies as well, because even though I have a small experience, I've been studying a lot, it makes much more sense to see the flock as an organism. We even have that metaphor when we deal with agroforestry in Brazil. A lot of people say that. They say the forestry organism. They don't treat trees. Sometimes they put thousands.
The macroorganism.
Yeah. So it makes a lot of sense. What you did, joining holistic management, concepts from forestry, and just simple down to earth, selection and care to make life easier. Thank you very much.
There's one more thing before we get out.
Yeah.
When I speak of a concentrated lambing at the best point of lambing.
Yeah. So people try to time their breeding season so that they have 4 months lambs for Christmas and New Year's, which is our summertime. So it's not a very good timing, because they give birth midwinter, so it's a bit challenging. So if you hold them back a little bit, say end of March, maybe April, then they're gonna come up. They're gonna come back in springtime, which is September. You might not have them to sell them in Christmas and New Year's, but like you say, less work, less stress, easier to select. So that's what I'm aiming for.
The last word is that when I say that you need a concentrated lambing at the best time of the year, it's much like you don't plant 1 hectare of annual crop every month throughout the year. You plant everything in the right time. So
yeah,
something like
the challenge we have here in the south of Brazil is that most people try to have their lambing midwinter, which is again, it's not as harsh as it is in Europe, but it's cold. It's cold enough. Some places go below zero. Some places have a little bit of snow, and they do all of that to try and have lambs that are heavy enough by Christmas time. So they're trying to have them in June, July, have a little, about 4 months there in order to sell it. And I think it's not worth it, because you can have actually them a very short breeding season, maybe the end of April, and this way they're gonna be lambing just at the beginning of the spring, and also the ewes will be actually eating the better grasses all winter long.
Yeah, so, it's strange.
Yeah. Anyway, so I prefer to have to deal with the challenge of selling them out of the holiday season. Maybe have a freezer. I'm not sure, but I just don't think it's smart, because then you have to prop them up, because half of their pregnancy was with the end of summer grasses, which are terrible. Half of the other half of the pregnancy was in the beginning of the winter grasses. Most people put them when they're too green, so they scour. So it's a mess. But anyway, I'm trying to be as natural as possible. and also and to produce as cheap as possible something that's really good. So I agree with you. The time of the year, and one thing that you said earlier, like if everything is fine, and I'm still lacking the eye to call them, one thing that we could do, instead of doing 34 days, just do 17. It's another way to select.
It's actually when you have 34 days, you know who lambed on the first 17 anyway.
Yeah, but then
so if you have a really harsh environment, maybe that should be 3 periods instead of 2. The point is that whatever goes to breeding should be from the first cycle. I mean, again, you can keep whatever you have, but breed from the best.
Yeah, my point was this. It makes sense what you're saying, but my point was this: if you're in a situation that you can't see clearly what to cull anymore, and you shorten the breeding season, then you might get some empty ones.
Yeah,
it makes sense. Mr. Bjorn, thank you very much. I think your work needs to be promoted. Someone told you should write a book. I'm going to join that person and say you should write a book because it's a way to spread this. And I think it's a very good approach for small farmers, for people with an ecological bias, people who want to be viable, but be viable improving the property, be viable improving a flock. I think a book would be very good. Meanwhile, if you don't write the book, I'll be coming back and inviting you to chat and learn more from you. I will start to try and breed my flock this year with the Creole sheep, and I'll keep you posted.
So thank you. It looks like the outline of my book, right? If someone asks me about my book, I tell them, my book is going to be 4 pages, and the rest is going to be footnotes.
Sometimes it's actually good. I like to read the footnotes. They reveal a lot about the author and the writing. Yeah,
there's no way. I mean, you can write mob breeding. Mob breeding takes just a few pages. The rest is just backstory and mob breeding is the simplicity on the other side of complexity. So the rest of the book will simply be some of the complexity.
Yeah, and examples to illustrate. I think it's going to be a great book, and even if you don't write this book in the near future, I think your work still need to be promoted because it helps small farmers, to be viable, to improve quality of life, to decrease the working load. So I think it's a very important work for small farmers. I thank you for that.
Thank you very much.